So we'll do our minutes on Friday after the other issues. Number 2, I wish to ascertain that there's quorum. In fact, I want to thank all of you members for coming on time, and I want to encourage that this habit remains persistent to the end, so that at no time should we lack quorum. And number 3, I think we all agreed to our ground rules, which we will be able to abide by. So let me call the clerk to lead us in prayer, then we start the formal meeting.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we shall treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and the welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
Amen. Can I have a proposal for adoption of agenda? Junet, seconder, Owen Bayer. If the first nominee is present, I know we have about 15 minutes to 9, but since everybody's here, we can start. I have 2 communications to make. I want to make them in the presence of the nominee so that we don't get disrupted. After that, we move on. The first nominee to appear before this committee on confirmation hearings is the Honorable H.E Musalia Mudavadi, H.E Prime Cabinet Secretary. If he's within the precincts of County Hall, you can usher him in. Is the nominee with reach? Good morning, the Honorable H.E Musalia Mudavadi. The mic, we want you to be on Hansard.
Is that okay? Yeah. Good morning.
Welcome
Mr.
to the
Chairman.
committee.
Yeah.
You'll stay put for a little while. The chair has two communications to make, whereafter I'll formally introduce you and the process will start. Honorable members, I have two short communications to make. The Committee on Appointments is established pursuant to Article 124(4) of the Constitution and the National Assembly Standing Order 204. Article 124(4)(a) of the Constitution provides that when a House of Parliament considers an appointment for which its approval is required under the Constitution or an Act of Parliament, the appointment shall be considered by a committee of the relevant House. Additionally, the National Assembly Standing Order 2044 spells out the mandate of the Committee on Appointments, which is to consider for approval by the House appointments of the Cabinet Secretaries under Article 152(2) of the Constitution. The procedure for conduct of approval hearings of constitutional appointments is provided for in the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act number 33 of 2011, hereinafter referred to as the Act. Section 5(1) of the Act provides that the appointing authority shall, upon nominating a person for an appointment to which the Act applies, notify the relevant House of Parliament accordingly. Pursuant to Section 5(1) of the Act, the House received a message from His Excellency the President nominating various persons for appointment to the offices of the Cabinet Secretaries, the Attorney General, and the Secretary to the Cabinet. Upon receipt of the message, the Speaker notified the House of the message from the President in communication dated 6 October 2022 and guided that the Committee on Appointments does proceed to conduct the vetting exercise and approval hearings as required under Article 124(4)(a) of the Constitution. Article 118 of the Constitution provides that Parliament shall facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative business and other business of Parliament and its committees. Section 6(4) of the Act further provides that the clerk shall notify the public of the time and place for holding an approval hearing at least 7 days prior to the hearing. In this regard, the clerk did publish an advert in the local dailies and notify the public of the time and place for holding the approval hearings of the nominees in accordance with the requirements of Article 118 of the Constitution and Section 6(4) of the Act. Section 6(9) of the Act provides that any person may, prior to the approval hearing and by written statement on oath, provide the clerk with evidence contesting the suitability of a candidate to hold the office to which the candidate has been nominated. To this end, and in accordance with the requirements of Section 6(9) of the Act, the clerk, via an advertisement published on 7th October 2022 in various local dailies, did invite the public to submit memoranda contesting the suitability of any of the persons nominated to the offices of the Cabinet Secretaries, Attorney General, and the Secretary to the Cabinet. By close of the date and time of receiving the memoranda from the public, the committee had received a total of 22 memoranda which the committee shall consider in seeking to determine the suitability of the respective nominees to hold office. Additionally, the clerk also wrote to the relevant bodies, this being the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Higher Education Loans Board, the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, and the Director of Public Prosecution, seeking the relevant information or any relevant information relating to the nominees. In conducting the approval hearings, which are scheduled to commence soon hereafter until Saturday, 22nd October 2022, the committee shall be guided by the provision of Section 6, 7, and 8 of the Act, which provide, and I quote, an approval hearing shall focus on a candidate's academic credentials, professional training and experience, personal integrity, and background. The criteria specified in the schedule shall be used by a committee during an approval hearing for the purposes of vetting a candidate. Additionally, Section 7 of the Act provides that the issues for consideration by the relevant House of Parliament in relation to any nomination shall be the procedure used to arrive at the nominee, any constitutional statutory requirements relating to the office in question, the suitability of the nominee for the appointment proposed having regard to whether the nominee's abilities, experience, and qualities meet the needs of the body to which nomination is being made. The parameters espoused in Section 6, 7, and 8 and Section 7 of the Act shall also form the basis through which the committee shall conduct the approval hearings. Upon conclusion of the approval hearings, the committee shall proceed to prepare a report for tabling in the House in accordance with the requirements of Section 8 of the Act. It is worth noting that Article 773, 2A and B of the Constitution provides that the guiding principles of leadership and integrity include a selection on the basis of personal integrity, competence, and suitability, and objectivity and impartiality in decision-making, and in ensuring that decisions are not influenced by nepotism, favoritism, other improper motives, or corrupt practices. Consequently, members, the committee is bound by the guiding principles of leadership and integrity and is required to conduct the approval hearings in accordance with the dictates of Article 73, 2A and B. Members, in your folders, you have been provided with the copies of the Constitution and the relevant Act, so you need reference that are available to you. Second short communication. Honorable members, you will recall that during our meeting held on Thursday, 13th October 2022, a question was raised by the Honorable P.O. Wandai, the leader of the minority party, on whether the position of the Cabinet Secretary is constitutional. As you may be aware, Article 152(1)(d) of the Constitution provides that the Cabinet consists of not fewer than 14 and not more than 22 Cabinet Secretaries. It is notable that in compliance with the provisions of Article 152(1)(d) of the Constitution, the President nominated 22 Cabinet Secretaries, among them being the Prime Cabinet Secretary. In this regard, the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary finds its constitutional basis under Article 152(1)(d) of the Constitution, and the nominee, if approved, will be one of the Cabinet Secretaries. Further, it's worth noting that through the Executive Order Number 1 of 2022 on the organization of government, the President assigned specific roles to the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, which includes coordinating and supervision of the ministries and state departments. However, I note that the designation of the roles of a Cabinet Secretary does not change the nature of the position of a Cabinet Secretary as anchored under Article 152, 1D of the Constitution. I further note that the Article 152 of the Constitution does not prescribe the designation of the title or functions to be conferred to each Cabinet Secretary. Consequently, it's within the powers of the President under Article 132 of the Constitution, as read with Section 10(1) of the National Government and Coordination Act No. 1 of 2013, to designate the title and assign functions to a Cabinet Secretary. To this end, the designation of a Prime Cabinet Secretary is not inconsistent with any provision of the law or the Constitution, and therefore the designation is properly, legally, and constitutionally grounded. Thank you. Having said that, I'm sure the Honorable Wandai, you are now at peace.
I am certainly not at peace, but I will reserve my comments to a later time.
Excellent.
In the course of these proceedings. Yes.
Wonderful. We'll now start. The Honorable I now introduce to you the first nominee to appear before the committee, the Honorable H.E Musalia Mudavadi, who is sitting before you. We'll introduce the members of the vetting committee, starting with the chairman, who is the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Masika Wetangula. I'll now invite the members to introduce themselves, starting with the leadership, sitting on my left.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My name is Kimani Shongwa, Member of Parliament for Kikuyu, the Leader of Majority.
My name is Opio Wandai, MP for Ugunja. Thank you.
My name is Honorable Junet Mohammed, Member of Parliament for Sona East and Minority Group.
Good morning, members. My name is Owen Baya, Member of Parliament for Kilifi North and Deputy Leader of Majority.
Good morning. My name is Robert Mbui, Member of Parliament for Kaviani and the Deputy Leader of the Minority Party.
Mheshimiwa Mukami.
Good morning. My name is Rehab Mukami, County MP, Nyeri.
Good morning. My name is Ferdinand Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Kwanza.
Good morning, George Gitonga Burugara, MP Tharaka.
Morning, Chair. Honorable David Kosing, MP Okosao.
Good morning, Honorable Speaker. My name is Abdul Rahim Dawood, MP for North Imenti, Meru County.
Good morning. My name is Honorable Mishimboko, MP Likoni Constituency, a member of this committee.
Good morning. My name is Nelson Arab Koech, Member of Parliament, Belgut Constituency.
Morning, Chair. My name is Caleb Amisi, MP Saboti.
Morning, Lido Raso, MP Saku.
Morning, Abdi Shurie, MP Malambala.
Good morning, Mary Emase Otucho, MP Teso South.
Good morning, MP Matungulu, Stephen Mule, a member of this committee.
Good morning, I'm Gikaria David, a member of Parliament, Nakuru Town East constituency.
Good morning, Naisula Lesuda, Member of Parliament, Samburu West constituency.
Thank you. We have our team from the Secretariat led by the Clerk of the National Assembly. I'll invite her to introduce her team.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Sarah Kyoko, the Acting Clerk of the National Assembly. I am accompanied by other members of staff led by Mrs. Florence Abonyo, who is the Director in the Directorate of Appropriation, Audit, Appropriation and other select committees, and the Deputy Director for Legal Services, Mr. Michael Karuru, And we have other members of staff with us. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now invite the nominee to take the oath that will be administered by one of our officers. It's either the Quran, the Bible, or affirmation.
I, H.E Musalia Mudavadi, do hereby solemnly affirm that I shall testify on all matters in question and tell this committee the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
We'll now invite the nominee to present his documents to the Secretariat. There's a list that was sent out, and I can guide you, the Honorable Mudavadi. The first document is compliance with tax obligations from KRN. The second document is clearance with Higher Education Loans Board, that you don't owe the public any money in that institution. The third document is clearance with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EFCC. The fourth document is Certificate of Good Conduct. You've given them?
Yes, I've given them.
Okay. The fifth is a question to you. Have you ever been charged and convicted in a court of law for a criminal offense?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Third, have you ever been adversely mentioned in an investigative report of a parliamentary committee or commission, and if yes, do you have any details?
To the best of my knowledge, nothing in the last few years.
Are you a dual citizen of Kenya and any other country?
No, I'm a Kenyan citizen.
I invite you to make a brief self-introduction and make a brief statement of yourself in not more than 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and also Chairman of the committee, and all honorable members of this distinguished committee. I am H.E Musalia Mudavadi. On a lighter note, I'm usually called my DVD. I have been a member of parliament in this country for 3 terms. I served as member of Sabatia constituency, and I entered parliament in 1989. Subsequently, I've also held various public positions. I have served as a Minister for Supplies and Marketing, Minister for Finance, Minister for Agriculture, Minister for Transport and Communications. I have also served as Minister for Local Government and Deputy Prime Minister. I have also served a short stint as a Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I've also been a member of leading political parties in this country, I was a member of Kano. I served as chairman of Kakamega branch and Vihiga. I have also been a member of the ODM party, where I was up to the level of deputy party leader. And at the same time, I have served as vice chairman of Kano. I've also been the party leader of the UDF party and the Amani National Congress. And now I am part of the Kenya Kwanza coalition. That is a profile, Mr. Speaker. But I think just coming to the issues at hand, first of all, I just want to say through you that I am honored and privileged to appear before this committee so that we can talk about the kind of people and the kind of vision that is required to be able to make Kenya a better place and to improve on the governance and democratic processes of our country. Mr. Chairman, I will also, through this committee, extend my appreciation to the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, for having seen it fit to nominate me to this position of Prime Cabinet Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we have just come out of an election as a nation, and the country is facing several challenges. So I take this initial appearance as being very critical so that the country can exit from the election mode and start looking at serious service delivery to the people of Kenya. Mr. Chairman, appearing before this committee is significant because it underpins the new constitution we have, and it also underpins the importance that Parliament plays and is going to play in the governance of this country and in shaping the lives of the people of Kenya. So I am honored and I am ready to respond to any questions that may arise. But I would also want at this early stage, Mr. Chairman, to also raise a few issues that may be of my personal integrity. One of the issues that has constantly and regularly been brought up is the issue of the golden bag. Mr. Speaker, I want to state here that at the age of 33, I was appointed to the Ministry of Finance. That is in 1993. That is when the golden bag saga had been in existence and was coming to its full-blown situation. This was really a scheme where the intention of government in terms of export compensation scheme went sour and it was misused, and it cost the country a lot of damage and expenses. Mr. Speaker, I took up the role of dismantling the network of the golden bag hydra. There are so many issues to this, and subsequently, Mr. Speaker, there was even a judicial commission of inquiry under the government of President Mwai Kibaki when he was elected. This commission of inquiry was conducted over a 2-year period. And Mr. Speaker, I just wish to draw members, and I'll be availing the document here, the report of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, specifically to page 220. There's a paragraph there that is very distinct about me, I think paragraph 589, which clearly brings out the details and exonerates me and even lauds me for having been the individual that stood firm and scuttled and dismantled the Goldenberg scam. That is one issue that I would like to bring up front. The other issue that I would like to bring up front, Mr. Speaker, Chairman, is that when I was in the Ministry of Local Government, there was also an issue about the cemetery scam. This is an issue that entailed overpricing of land by the City Council of Nairobi at that time. There were allegations that threw issues
Yes,
on me.
Yes.
Chairman, I totally agree with the honourable member on the trajectory, but I wanted to indulge the Speaker, the Chairman, that at this session, at this point, the minutes you gave is just for self-explanatory introduction.
Yes.
We will come to those issues in due course, Mr. Speaker.
Let him wind up.
Yes. Thank you. I'll wind up. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. I just want to state that that matter, again, was dealt with. It went through the courts, and after investigations by the relevant agencies, those who were culpable were tried and convicted, and I was not one of them. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to state that it is important that these issues hopefully will come to rest as the details come out. And I want to assure the members of this committee that it is my intention to work very closely and cooperate with the National Assembly, with the legislature, in ensuring that we have a better country. Thank you.
Thank you for sticking to your 10 minutes. You have actually taken less. A few questions before we open you to members of the committee. Have you at any time held any position in a political party?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have.
Which is?
I have, the most recent one was being party leader of the Amani National Congress.
Are you still the leader?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Have you ever been dismissed from office for any conflict between personal interest and public or official duties?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Have you ever been adversely associated with practices that depict bias, favoritism, or nepotism in the discharge of public duties?
No.
Would you tell this committee your financial net worth?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I would comment on that. If I take my investments in shares in various, in some companies, and also the properties that I own, I would put my net worth at about 4 billion shillings.
4 billion. What are your current and anticipated sources of income?
Mr. Speaker, rental income, dividends, where I have the shareholdings, and also interests, and of course other expenses that come from the farm.
Honourable members of the committee, I'll now open the hearings to the committee. Basic rules that we agreed on. Questions must carry decorum. No personal issues, no parochial issues. And the nominee, you answer all the questions through the chair, so that you don't say, I'm answering Honorable Wandai or Honorable Junet. All questions are asked collectively as a committee through the chair. I'll give the first shot to the Honorable Kimani Ichungwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi.
As we proceed, you keep your eye on that clock. When you see our time will be up.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
10 minutes to 0, we will give the nominee an opportunity to make some closing remarks, some closing statements.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Musalia, on your page 4 of the document that you submitted on self-declaration, you indicate on potential conflict of interest that you have none. And the question that follows after that is for you to explain how you would resolve any potential conflict of interest. And looking at your net worth and the schedule that you have submitted, I see you have interest in an aircraft and exclusive air services. You have property on Riverside. I believe this is what you're getting rental income from, and other office space that you have also indicated, 3 properties, offices owned by Triton Limited. Supposing the government of Kenya that if you are approved, you'll be serving under, list any of these properties, or one of the government institutions wanted to use this aircraft that you own, would that portend a potential conflict of interest, and how then would you deal with that?
Mr. Chairman, clearly there are procedures sorry, Mr. Chairman, clearly there are procedures that are in law that would make sure that there is a public disclosure or full disclosure under such circumstances if they did arise. But Mr. Speaker, I would also want to state that there are processes that would have to be followed legally, and I would not in any way interfere with such a process if it were to arise. Secondly, I would not use my position in public to try and interfere with that. I would really stick to the issues required in terms of integrity as required by law and the Constitution, so that any conflict that would arise would then not have to arise.
Honorable Wandai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have got 2 questions in quick succession. One, the Honorable Mudavadi, and following, or notwithstanding the ruling by the Speaker a while ago, you obviously know that in the coalition agreement that you entered into within the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, you did appreciate the fact that the position to which you have been nominated did not exist, or does not exist even as we speak. And that's why in that agreement there was a commitment that within 30 days a legislation shall be introduced in Parliament to provide greater legal clarity on the position, roles, and functions of Prime Cabinet Secretary. That is at Article 21K of that agreement. I happen to have gone through it in the House after being tabled by my friend Honorable Kimani Chungwa. It goes ahead to say that the legislation to be introduced shall amend the National Government Coordination Act to include the office of Prime Cabinet Secretary as proposed hearing to the existing structures under the aforesaid Act. Do you understand it? Doesn't this really confirm that without such legislation having been introduced, now more than 30 days since the election, the position to which you are being proposed or recommended or nominated is anchored on quicksand, constitutionally speaking? That is one. 2, you were asked a while back if you have been mentioned in any corruption case or scandal, and I listened to your answers. But let me jog your memory, Honorable Mudavadi. On the civil case number 280 of 2007, That is the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission versus H.E Musalia Mudavadi. In this matter, you are being accused of having fraudulently acquired property in Woodley Estate in Nairobi. Property that belonged to the public, a property that was under the care of the Nairobi County Council then. This property is reference number LR number 209-13-539/129. What do you have to say about this? And if indeed it is true that you participated in what Kenyans would love to call grabbing of public property, public land, how does that sit with the requirements under Chapter 6 of the Constitution? That if by any chance you are approved, you will be swearing to protect and adhere to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with that very point. This is the Woodley Estate. Woodley Estate is a property that belongs to now the county government of Nairobi. And I want to put it very clearly here that I stayed in Woodley, and our family has always had that premises. Now, I want to put it on record that to this day, we pay rent to the county government of Nairobi. At no time has that property ever been transferred. I want to put it on record here that the ethics or the Kenya Anti-Corruption body at that time went on a tangent that they had not verified the facts. I ended up also seeking legal redress for defamation on their part and for them having given out misleading information. Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman, as we speak today, the same property belongs to the county government of Nairobi, and we pay rent. I will not be paying rent for a property that is personally mine. And therefore, I was not involved in any land grabbing whatsoever. The records are there, and I can request that even this committee can go further and seek whatever evidence they wish from the county government of Nairobi on that particular issue. And hopefully it will also be put to rest, because it was, in my view, a witch hunt at that time. Mr. Chairman, I also want to say that it is on the coalition agreement. It is true that the founding members of Kenya Kwanza, that is Amani National Congress, a party that I belong to, but I'm no longer the party leader. The Ford Kenya, Mr. Chairman, you happen to be a member of that party, and of course the UDA party, headed by the President of the Republic of Kenya. We did enter into a coalition agreement, which we submitted to the Registrar of Political Parties, and it is a valid legal coalition document. Mr. Speaker, when we were forming government, we were alive to the fact that there are issues that can be done and executed by the President through the executive order. And these are now being manifested through Executive Order number 1. Now, the streamlining and clarity that we spoke about would be those that would help in refining the mechanisms of coordination of government. But they do not in any way negate the fact that the President, constitutionally and in accordance with the Coordination Act, has the powers to set up his government and assign functions, and this is under Section 132 of the Constitution, assign functions to his cabinet secretaries or to other persons in government in a constitutional manner to assist him in the delivery of services and leading the country. So I believe that we have not breached any law, and when we talked about looking at the Coordination Act was in the context of strengthening that Coordination Act and not necessarily saying that it is an impediment.
Honorable Naisula.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Musalia, you have been a fierce critic of the previous regime and especially on matters corruption. And if the recent events by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution to withdraw cases of corruption are anything to go by, how do you intend to fight corruption in public service when it is clear that there is no political will to fight it? And what are your views on the withdrawal of these corruption cases and why at this particular time?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
For your answer,
yes.
Honorable members, we did agree as a matter of procedure that you lift your tongue and not your hand. So you wait when the member has finished, the nominee has finished, then you lift your tongue. It makes it easier for the media and for us here. What we can do, if you have a pen and paper, Honorable Mudavadi, we can take 2, 3, 4 questions, then you can be able to answer. Okay, so raise your tags. Number 1 is Naisula. Number 2 is Robert Mbui. Number 4 is Major Raso. Number 5 is Emase. Then after that, we'll go another round. So know your number when one, and I encourage you to ask 1 question each.
So I can deal with that one first, and then we come to the second.
Yeah, deal with that, then the rest will follow in the manner we have given the numbers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to say that, first of all, I need to appreciate, and we all ought to appreciate, that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution is an independent office, and we have no oversight over that office. It is independent and it makes its own decisions. So the details and circumstances of why he would drop cases, I think that office would be best suited to respond to it directly. But going forward, I think one of the things that we want to point out is that in the fight against corruption, I think we should move away from any attempt to weaponize or to try and use such battles against corruption for political purposes. So, Mr. Chairman, I am so refrained to comment in detail because, as I said, the DPP office would be best suited to respond to this. But I think going into the future, it should be clear that whenever we are dealing with corruption, we must avoid anything that is a witch hunt, anything that is politically instigated, and we must be sticklers of the law. And going forward, I think what is important is through Parliament to see how independent institutions within the justice system, and of course those that handle other matters, are properly resourced so that they can do their work without any fear or favor whatsoever. Thank you.
You'll record the next 4 questions and then answer them in the row in which they came.
Thank you, Chair. Consistency in leadership is very, very important, especially when one is nominated to a position to serve in the cabinet. I would like to ask the nominee, during campaigns, you were very persistent in castigating the change of constitution under the BBI. And I want to quote that consistently you said that the handshake brothers were were hell-bent on creating positions instead of dealing with the obvious things of high cost of living. Now that you have been nominated to this position, which is one of the positions that we were talking about, which is the position of Prime Minister, do you still hold that view? Secondly, you are also totally opposed to the issue of borrowing during the campaign trail. Are you still opposed to this government borrowing any further monies? And thirdly and last, I
want you to stick to an average of one question. I'll tolerate two. Three is not right.
Very important.
Because we are almost 21.
And you saw how quickly I was speaking. To make sure that...
it doesn't diminish the substance of the question. But I'll allow you, but honorable members, going forward, I encourage you to ask one question each, if you can. Yes.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. This is an issue to do with what the President talked about when he was appointing this office. And he said that after the office of the President and the Deputy President, this would be the third most powerful position. The Constitution gives the third most powerful position in the country to the Speaker of the National Assembly. What is your comment on that? Thank you.
The next is Raso. After Raso, we are proceeding to then
Thank you very much, Chair. The question I want to pose to you, Honorable Mudavadi, at the heart of this vetting is honesty, integrity, patriotism, trust, and acting in the greatest interest of the Republic of Kenya. As a former finance minister, and also looking through what Kenya Kwanza came up with as a manifesto, what are the likely things you are likely to do as the ringmaster or as the coordinator of government activities, the indicators of economic revival, or things you are likely to put in place for Kenyans to begin to start having money in their pockets? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. You are the most disciplined. Seeing a military man. Next is the Honorable Hussein.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to congratulate the nominee for being nominated for this very position. But Chair, let me ask the nominee, being a high-profile person in Kenya and we respect him, really does he believe that this office exists? Being the first, and that in accordance with Honorable Speaker or Chair to Section 7 of Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act. Does it really exist? Being the first being vetted in this country. Two, through you, Chair. And that is and very clear evidence, Honorable Chair, when even in the executive order, somebody is struggling to be able even to give functions. And I want to go to this function of chairing and coordinating national government legislation and engaging or coordinating with the leadership of the House. Chair, don't you think that is the work of Attorney General? And that is why it was really struggling to be able to give him some responsibilities. And perhaps maybe this will be the first office of conflict, Honorable Speaker. What does he think about that?
Honorable Member, I think as we go forward, take into account the ruling or the direction or communication from the Chair, that this position is properly grounded in law and under the Constitution. When you finish, you switch off your microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Mudavadi, there is a general perception that the duties of the Prime Cabinet Secretary are similar to those of the Deputy President. How do you intend to ensure that there is no conflict between the two offices in undertaking your responsibilities?
Thank you. You may now answer the 4 questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just want to state that I am a person who believes in consistency, and I will explain myself so that that issue can be clarified. Mr. Speaker, the issue that relates to the BBI debate that is now behind us, if one will recollect very carefully, on both occasions, when I was at the Bomas of Kenya at one of the public functions, I did highlight that there are some good things in that document, and there are also some toxic things in that document. What I said then still holds today. And clearly, one of the issues that was on the table at that time was that the issues around the BBI found their Waterloo because we did not listen to each other. I will personally say that at one point I did highlight at the BBI meeting that this institution called the Ombudsman to the judiciary was going to scatter the very noble objectives within the BBI document, because it was going to encroach on the independence of the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, without blinking, the people at Bomas heckled because they thought that we were not speaking to the truth. But one of the key issues that led to the Waterloo of the BBI document in the courts of law was precisely that, because it was a good document mixed with some toxic aspects, and that is a matter that is now behind us. Mr. Speaker, it also is important for us to consider that in the conversation, the reorganizing of government, and that is one of the things we said, you could reorganize government at a less cost without having to go to certain levels. And if then the country is in the right mood and there is sufficient public participation and consensus, constitutions will be amended, and in any case, there's room for amendments of constitutions. So on that score, I just want to say I've been consistent, and I don't think I misled anybody on this particular issue. I want to state that on the question of debt, the country right now is facing a challenge of debt. And from 2015, for instance, I was very consistent to the Kenyan people during my political campaigns then, stating that we need to rationalize our borrowing, to be more prudent, so that the profile of our debt can have more concessionary funding. The portfolio should have more concessionary funding and limit the levels of commercial debt that we were incurring. I think that remains an objective that we must pursue as a country going forward, because we will still borrow, but we must borrow prudently so that the debt repayment process does not harm other activities of government. We should not be borrowing to deal with our recurrent expenditure. We should be borrowing so that we can engage in serious capital development, whether it's in infrastructure, water, health, etc. So these are critical issues that I would be saying that working in a collaborative manner with Parliament, we can find better solutions collectively in dealing with this particular debt challenge that we have. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it should also go on record that we must be an honorable government. And honor in this kind of situation for any nation is your ability to repay your debts. We should not be a country that should walk into the defaulting mode. And it will be therefore necessary that going forward, we work closely with each other, and Parliament also plays its oversight role so that the honor of this country can be maintained on this debt issue. Therefore, I would just want to say that we will be paying close attention. Personally, I'll be paying very close attention because the heartbeat of this country is our economy. The people are suffering. The cost of living is very high. And the initiatives that we must bring forward through legislation and even policy interventions must be those that will mitigate these particular challenges. But they must also be realistic and be in accordance with the law. I also want to touch briefly on the issue of the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. I think it is important that at the very earliest, that political document, which was the flagship of Kenya Kwanza, is translated into a serious and fundable policy document of the government of Kenya, highlighting the specific areas that were the flagship, things that would create jobs, the issue of access of credit to a wider section of the country at affordable rates, the issue of making sure that the cost of living is mitigated and people live with dignity is going to be forefront in what we want to do. So we will engage all stakeholders, and I'll want to plead that we work very closely with Parliament so that we can remove the backlog in pieces of legislation that may be obstacles towards moving forward. We'll be open to also listen to ideas and even support legislation that will come for the benefit of this country from the opposing end of our chamber, because we have one nation and we have to work together collectively to find solutions. I also want to state that the AG's office, Mr. Chairman, is the primary state legal advisor to the government. And they have a lot of other functions that they also deal with. Now, when we say that my office will be providing greater liaison, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, this is important because we live in a political world. We want to be able to have greater collaboration, greater interaction, greater consultation, so that those of us who then will be interacting quite a lot with the general public on some of these issues from the executive viewpoint, can have the right interface between Parliament and the people as we move forward. There is no intention whatsoever, and I have been in public office for a long time, to say that we can usurp the role of the Attorney General. We shall be very careful. But it is important that that political aspect of it is brought forward more effectively than in the past. We must have more robust consultation, Mr. Chairman. I also want to make it very clear that we want to bring a whole of government. We want to bring that cohesion. We don't want to operate in silos. we don't want to be territorial. And I think this speaks volumes in the functioning of government. I think part of our problem sometimes is that somebody says that this is my boma, and I don't want anybody else to be part of this boma or to be in this boma. I think that is dangerous going forward if you want to work together as a nation and to have a coordinated government. So we want to have that open and holistic approach. I also want to assure the members that I don't think President Ruto was struggling to define functions of this office. It was perfectly in his realm to examine and decide how we can support each other. And I am sure that if we look carefully, there's no conflict whatsoever with the functions of the Prime Cabinet Secretary's office and the Deputy Presidents. And I also want to put it on record that where would you find a government on this earth where there are no cross-cutting issues? There are always cross-cutting issues in government, which require consultation. So at a personal level, I will not hesitate to walk from my office and visit the Deputy President's office and consult with him if there's any issue that required consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I wanted to put my question in this way. Chairman, they say the cabinet consists of the president and the cabinet ministers and attorney general and others. But this nominee was given the position of prime cabinet minister. And in that, it means that he is the most senior cabinet minister than other cabinet ministers. But when I looked at the executive order that was released by the president, Mr. Chair, one of the functions that was given to this office is to chair, number 4, is to chair the principal secretaries' committees and supervise the technical monitoring and monitoring evaluation of government policies programs. Now, this is a senior minister. They are cabinet ministers. They are principal secretaries in every cabinet ministry, under every cabinet minister, who report to their ministers. So I'm wondering, how should a senior cabinet minister chair principal secretaries when you know that there is head of public service also who coordinates principal secretaries? So I'm wondering, the cabinet prime minister is dealing with cabinet principal secretaries who have ministers in their line of duty. But more importantly, Chair, I also want the nominee to take this opportunity to slay it and lay to rest the issue of the golden bag. The golden bag issue, and this other issue of the cemetery land. And having been a mayor of a city one time, under the previous CAP 265, the previous Act of Parliament.
Which city?
Where you visited me one time. We couldn't find a proper hotel. I couldn't find a proper hotel for you, but you visited the city with one street. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, that CAP required the approval of the cabinet minister for the county councils and municipalities for functions that they were supposed to do, including approving their budgets. So I want him to take this opportunity today to lay this matter to rest once and for all. And lastly, I wanted to ask the nominee whether he's happy with his office at Kenya Railways, whether that office is suitable for a prime cabinet minister.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, before I ask my question, I want to put a rejoinder on what Honorable Junet has just said. In the issue of Anglo-leasing, Golden Park and the cemetery, land scandals. I would ask a question to Honorable Musalia. What will be taking responsibility mean to you? Because these things happen under your watch when you are the former finance minister and the local government minister. My question now will be, don't you think that His Excellency the President has done injustices to appoint some leaders among the cabinet secretaries who had already been rejected by the electorate, or rather by the public, during the just ended elections? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to the nominee. Under Executive Order number 1, one of the functions that has been, or one of the roles to be played by your office is that of coordinating the legislative agenda of the government with the parliament. This is where actually it comes into conflict, or it's supposed to be in conflict with the role of the Honorable Attorney General, but it's clarified that it is coordinating the legislative function between the legislature and the ministries. And in most cases, ministries deal with the subsidiary legislation. We have seen ministries making laws, subsidiary laws, which are known as delegated legislation, which are so inconsistent with the other laws that it has taken Parliament a lot of time to actually do away with most of those regulations. That is called annulling, and this is done through the Committee on Delegated Legislation. As the coordinator of that function, how do you propose to deal with laws made by ministries when they are brought to Parliament, so that we do not have to spend a lot of time annulling, but should actually be passed for purposes of enabling the government to function properly?
Thank you, Speaker, Chair. Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, taking your experience in economics and having served as Minister for Finance in this country, looking at this country, the cost of living is very high. We have issues of the subsidies in fuel and unga and all that. How would you advise the President on how to bring down the cost of living, how to work around the issues of subsidies and bring down the cost of fuel in this country, and what would be the expectations of Kenyans in terms of economic revival and economic uplifting as you take office as Prime Cabinet Secretary? Thank you.
There we go. Nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to state the following. That when we look at the functions of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, as envisaged in Executive Order number 1, the whole aspect of coordination, technical evaluation, monitoring of programs, policy formulation, and even projects. Mr. Chairman, I think working with the principal secretaries is going to be a very, very important function of this office. It is important for us to acknowledge that principal secretaries are the accounting officers. They are the ones who go into the detail of financial disbursements in their respective ministries. So to me, having a situation where there is a regular, constant, and structured interaction in this area will play a very, very important role in improving on efficiency and resource allocation in the country, at least from the perspective of this government. So I do not feel in any way that this is a demeaning role. I think it is not. no Kenyan, no office is too small in this country. We need to pay attention to the detail. We need to develop a structure where clear data, clean data, will become the driving point for our decision making across the board, policy formulation, resource allocation. We need accurate data. And I think it is important that we have a blend of the politics working with the technocrats to try and tease this out for the betterment of the country. I also want to state again that I did address the issue in my opening remarks around the Golden Bag, and I want to assure this committee and the country at large that my conscience is clear. My conscience is clear. This was a menace to this country. It was a program of export compensation, which was a policy position of the government of the day to try and spur exports in this country. And then it was abused. And in the process of it being abused, it caused havoc. And I would really plead that the members of the public, and more so I would appeal through members of the Fourth Estate here, if they can help Kenyans to dissect the Judicial Commission of Inquiry report in this country, it will really help in getting Kenyans to understand where we were, what was this about, and how did it come to an end. I can only plead on that basis. On the issue of the cemetery scandal, I come back to it again and I say this matter was dealt with, it was investigated, the matter was even dealt with through the courts, and decisions were made by the courts. And I was not in any of those areas as somebody who was a suspect or anything. So it is so clear that that matter has come to an end. On the issues, somebody raised an issue about under-leasing. Again, I can only say that it would be important to note that this matter was dealt with again in 2016. And in 2016, I was a state witness in those matters. I was not a culprit. I went and testified as a state witness. So I think I would say that that should be sufficient. On the issue of the Kenya Railways, I am happy, very happy about the Kenya Railways as a location for this office. First of all, the people who voted us in are there, alighting every morning to go to work and alighting every evening to go home. To me, I say that that is a constant reminder that whenever I go to that office, I will know that those are hard workers in our country, and therefore we must not let them down. We must work hard and improve on this country. So I am personally very delighted to be domiciled at the railway headquarters. That is perfect. I'm proud of that. Mr. Chairman, nominating people who may have contested in elections and maybe not succeeded to take up public offices is not an offense. It is perfectly constitutional, and it does not mean that because you have lost an election that you cannot be helpful to the nation in a different capacity. I am sure we sit here, there were those who are from the Kenya Kwanza realm, and there are those who are from the Azimio realm. People made their decisions, but here we are sitting as this committee by right and beginning to work together towards what is good for the entire country. So I don't think we should discriminate against any individual who may not have succeeded in one situation from taking up an assignment in another position. I want to assure that the issue of delegated legislation is very, very important. And that is why we are putting more emphasis around this need for coordination and liaison and cooperation within ministries and also with greater interface with the National Assembly, and particularly those that will also handle not just all legislation, but even that delegated responsibilities on matters of statute. I want to state here that that holistic approach is what we want to bring in. Because it is true, when we operate in silos, we create laws and regulations that become a serious problem to the functioning of the economy and delivery of services. So I think that is a very critical anchor in this matter. On the issue of subsidies and maybe broad commentary on the economy, I just want to say that subsidies can be very expensive. They are usually what you might call targeted interventions to try and mitigate on some issues. Some may be short-term, some may be to spur certain economic activity or agricultural activity or production. They're usually short-term interventions targeted. But I want to try and appeal to the nation that we should not become a nation that thrives on subsidies, because they can be very expensive to maintain. Funding of subsidies can be very, very dangerous if your economy cannot sustain it. And a classic example was the subsidy around the petroleum sector. Mr. Chairman, as I speak here, I was the one who actually removed price controls when we were liberalizing the economy, even on petroleum products. And price controls were also a hidden way of trying to introduce subsidies on petroleum products then. And we used to have shortages of petroleum products because people were playing around with that kind of economic regime. So if we want to go forward, we must be very, very careful that subsidies do not become a permanent feature of our economic policy. That is what I would advise, and that is what I'll advise the President and advise the Kenyans on this matter, that we must find better ways in the long run of spurring economic growth and activity so that people can move away from that. And the key is to make sure that inflation is tamed. Because the whole issue of subsidies is because somebody feels that something is not affordable. So they're looking for some mitigation. But ultimately, if as a country we can fight and contain inflation, then the urge for subsidies will become less as we go ahead. So I didn't want to make this too much of that, but I was just looking at it as a generality and that's something that we need to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawood, the Honorable Dawood, the Honorable Mukami, the Honorable Mule, the Honorable Koech. There's still another round.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to congratulate the nominee, Honorable Mudavadi. Honorable Mudavadi, you've been a minister for local government and you've been in the executive for many, many years. And during your time, prior to the devolution system being in place, there was a sessional paper which you signed off. That was a sessional paper on devolved government under the Constitution of Kenya. And in that sessional paper, 7.3 and 7.5, it talks about the process of intervention, where intervention would be needed in the devolved system of government, and where it states that intervention would be for 90 days and not more. What I want to ask you, in your personal opinion, because you were the author of that document under you, do you think that the devolved system of government has worked as anticipated with regards to revenue and service delivery? And as well as, do you think that under the devolved system, the national government should take over any functions which are assigned to the county government, and NMS was established by the national government, which had 2 years under its wing? Do you think that do we need, as a national government, to take over any other county in the same manner as NMS? Because if it is possible, then is it 90 days? Because I know that's not your purview, but because being a minister for local government for all those years, and in being in the executive, would you advise the president to do what you have suggested in that document? Second question would be for the state corporations. Please, Mr. Speaker. You are aware that many parastatals are not performing the way they should. And you being in charge of the state corporations, as per the mandate the president has given in the executive order, what would you advise the president in folding up the parastatals or state corporations and making a smaller bureaucracy? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Rahab.
Congratulations, Honorable Mudavadi. My question is, one of the roles of the Prime Cabinet Minister is to oversee the national legislative agenda for the Kenya Kwanza government. What are some of your priority legislative proposals, and what measures will you put in place to ensure that they are actualized?
Very good. What was the next? Mole.
Thank you very much. This goes to the nominee. First and foremost is that you're being nominated to one of the positions to coordinate peace, economic, diaspora, environment, culture, diplomacy as a 4 pillar of the Kenyan government. My question is that goes back to where you left on agro-leasing, whereby you say that you are a witness. But is in a public domain, the former CS, Chris Obure, indicated to Judge Ann that you did a letter yourself, which he received on 9th of May, the year 2002, during that hearing, whereby you sought direct procurement of equipments for Postal Corporation of Kenya, and indicated that was the intention of the government to refurb that corporation. My question goes, Mr. Chair, to the nominee, that now you are coordinating the principal secretaries in every ministry who are the accounting officers. I'm afraid, are you going to assure Kenyans you will not return to this habit of direct procurement and instructing them what to do in their ministries? Thank you.
Coach.
First, congratulations, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, on your nomination. My question is, one of your tasks, which will include supervising the technical monitoring and evaluating committees of government policies, programs, and projects. Projects across the country were halted for whatever reason, not only in the immediate preceding regime, but even dating back to 2002. In fact, statistics have placed the value of the stalled projects at 9 trillion, which is equivalent to our country's entire economy. The scenario is impacting negatively on us because we have to pay cost of the delay to the contractors and even making the costs high in the long run. What plans do you have, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, with regard to the stalled government projects, and possibly, if you could give us a roadmap and even possibly timeline? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start with the issue of devolution. It is true that when the country promulgated the 2010 Constitution, I was tasked with the function of ensuring that the initial legislation, critical legislations to facilitate and actualize devolution were put in place. Now, there is the issue of when can the national government perhaps intervene. And at that time, we looked at the question of 90 days because what we intended to achieve, and it still stands, is that the Constitution is very clear that there shall be the national government and there shall be county governments. And any intervention cannot be permanent. An intervention to undertake some corrective measures must be limited, targeted, so that the rights of those people in that county can be restored and they have the ability to govern through their county governments. That is why the intervention period was limited. The issue that we have seen, as in the case of the NMS, all I can say is that maybe we have to wait for the report of the Auditor General at the end of the day to bring out the details of how this particular intervention was run or conducted. But the initial findings that may be in the public domain is that the NMS itself has left a debt of almost 16 billion to the county government of Nairobi. And the nature of how they went in is such that they may not have followed proper procurement procedures along the line. But without casting any ill motive or on any particular thing, I think the report of the Auditor General will be very helpful for us to really discern the experiences of NMS in Nairobi, and also then be able to guide Parliament, guide Kenyans, and guide the county governments on any future interventions, because this is a learning process. We have had devolution now for 10 years. You may notice that even now there is no need, in my view, to have a ministry of devolution, because these are entities that are constitutionally provided for, and they should not be interfered with by the national government, but there can be collaboration, and there are mechanisms through the intergovernmental relations legislation that Parliament passed. There are ways that this can be done. On the issue of state corporations, there are many. I think we may be having almost 300 plus state corporations. So that is a portfolio that seriously needs to be looked at very, very critically. And I know this is one of the functions that will fall directly within my purview. And I can say that we'll pick up from the reports that are there. There was the famous report by the Abdul Kadir Committee. That is a report that has very useful suggestions on the way forward. But I'll also be saying that, and to also touch on part of the legislation agenda, I will really want to request Parliament to actually just reflect and realize that the privatization program in our country of some of these state corporations has actually stagnated. It has not been moving at all. And I would be calling on yourselves and other critical stakeholders that this is dialogue that we need to have, so that one of the urgent pieces of legislation to kind of accelerate the process of reforming these sectors or the parastatals, that law be urgently looked at and proper consultations undertaken so that some changes can be made there to improve efficiency and to also disengage the government from areas where losses continue to be incurred, and yet that particular entity may not be necessary to continue holding on to as the government of the day, because those are public resources. So these are critical areas. Each of these institutions will have to be looked at from a sector viewpoint and also from its individual viewpoint, and it is important that professional advice is really brought to bear in reforming the state corporations. So I've talked of an example of that as one critical piece of legislation. There are legislations that we will have to look at if we are going to have a hustler fund. It is important that the legal framework be determined quickly. We have to look at what are the existing funds. Are we duplicating? And if you're duplicating, what are the implications? So all these, as an example, would be again a critical piece of legislation to help in actualizing this process of providing greater access to credit by all Kenyans. There are laws that will be necessary, and I want to also appeal laws that will help in dealing with wastage and misuse of resources. These are critical areas that we can review together. And my target is to have legislation that will, to fast-track legislation that will also unlock the economic potential of the Kenyan people, whether in agriculture, whether in manufacturing, whether in trading. So these are the areas that I think we need to look at so that we can have institutions or private sector that is generating jobs as rapidly as is necessary. I want to state that in the issue of diplomacy, we as a nation will have to look more and more to economic diplomacy. And Mr. Chairman, I can speak here while looking at somebody who has been the head of our diplomatic missions, business in the country for some time. But economic diplomacy is going to be very critical. What are our interests? We must quickly see how we can benefit from areas like the African Continental Free Trade arrangements. We must look seriously at enhancing our presence and our footprint within the East African Community region, whether you're bringing in the DRC, South Sudan, and how we can network. We must also play a very significant role, because for economic diplomacy to work, there must be peace in this region. So we must be more aggressive in dealing with the issues around Somalia. We'll have to be more aggressive in dealing with the issues even around South Sudan. And I can give an example. For instance, there's a road that the government of Kenya, with its partners, want to push all the way to Southern Sudan. But there is an issue right up there between Kenya's border and South Sudan that requires urgent political resolution, because that road is supposed to link. So the funding is there, but the process cannot be completed or pushed further because there's still some political issues to be dealt with. So these, to me, are going to be very critical interventions that need to be done. The diaspora, Mr. Chairman, the figures are in the public domain. The Kenyan diaspora, for instance, brings in place into this country almost 480 billion Kenya shillings annually. And the president has, in fact, in designating the issues around foreign affairs, has now brought the issue of the diaspora to the limelight, because that has now become a very critical constituency in the development of our country. We also have to take advantage of things like the climate change programs and play a leading role in those areas. They also provide a platform for a lot of funding if we can work well within those circles. So in coordinating matters around diplomacy, I'll be putting a lot of focus there, while also saying that we need to also continue strengthening our relations with our traditional partners, and make sure at all times the Kenyan interest is covered. We may even want to work more aggressively. There's been an attempt about Kenyans who are suffering in some countries when they get jobs there. These are issues that will require very serious and more robust and high-profile intervention to try and deal with that crisis, so that we can avoid seeing the things we see and we read about, Kenyans undergoing very serious problems in different parts of the globe. I just want to repeat the issue around Anglo leasing. I want to state that that matter was canvassed in court. It was dealt with. It is behind us. And even the issues that came up, it was not too long ago that I read in the papers that indeed even those who were facing trial on some of these issues were acquitted eventually. So it was dealt by the court. And I want to state very critically that ministers, or for that matter cabinet secretaries, do not engage in procurement. You can talk about policy issues, but there is a procurement law that must be adhered to all the time. The halted projects or stalled projects, this is a crisis, and hence that very important committee of PSS and all the technical people. because we need to have a clear audit of these projects. It's clear that some may no longer be useful to the country. Therefore, there's a very serious need for a detailed approach and professional approach to looking at these things so that decisions can be made and appropriate interventions can be developed. And this also brings to question the serious issue of pending bills in this country, because very many businessmen, contractors in our counties, you know them, some have been crippled because they have never been paid for years. They are suffering, they have families, they have employees, they have loans in banks, but they've been crippled. So as we deal with this issue of stalled projects, one critical issue that we must also address fairly and in a balanced way will be the issue of pending bills in our public entities.
The Honorable Kaliba Misi, the Honorable Ferdinando Wanyonyi, the Honorable Shurie, and the Honorable Ikaria. In that order.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, the problem of asking the last, you find
I hope
that
you are looking at the clock.
Yeah. The problem of asking the last chair is you find all your questions have been asked before. But nevertheless, I've been looking at your CV, Honorable Mudavadi. You were a minister in 1989. That time I was 3 years old. You were Minister for Supplies, Marketing, Minister for Finance, Agriculture, Information, Transport, Vice President. In fact, I remember vividly when you are the Vice President, you presented a check to me to go to Starehe, presented by Kenyans living in US. And now I'm serving my second term in Parliament. I'm here vetting you for a position that is still mesmerizing Kenyans. Does it portray you as a man who lacks ambition, or is it lack of option? Because you are going to be in a position, head of a cabinet. Kenya is an ambitious nation in the community of nations. We want to portray as an ambitious man who is at the head of the cabinet, the head of head. Look at this history that spread in 30 years. Does it portray you as a man who does not have ambition? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you very back home that in the previous parliaments we have been actually, as a committee, there has been a tendency of the cabinet secretaries failing to honor summons and failing to respond to matters comprehensively without doing any research, what have you, and in a timely manner. In your role, how will you ensure that the cabinet secretaries actually attend the committees and sometimes come to Parliament? Because we've had these cases where you someone and a cabinet secretary said somebody else, maybe a junior fellow, and can't even answer comprehensively the questions that you're supposed to be. So are you going to ensure that that is done properly? Secondly, the Speaker, I want to ask a question that is important in agriculture. We've had cases where, and now we have this drought, and irrigation is misplaced. Instead of being in agriculture, it's misplaced, it's actually in tourism. It's under blue economy. So are you able to assist to bring irrigation back to agriculture so that can be able to do some of the projects like Kalana Kulalu and the rest? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to ask the nominee, how does he want to cultivate a relationship and a good working relationship between institutions that oversight the government, e.g. Parliament and the Office of the Auditor General, with his office and being the Prime Cabinet Secretary together with his cabinet? Thank you.
Ikaria.
Thank you, Speaker.
Pengine niulize ndugu yetu Wycliffe Mudavadi swali kwa Kiswahili. Unajua serikali ambayo iliondoka ilikuwa kuna agenda 4 ambazo zilikuwa nzuri sana, lakini haikuweza kutimiza yale maneno ambayo ilikuwa. So serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iko na mambo 5 ambaye italete, na Mkenya wa kawaida ambaye umesema na unampata pale railways anakutazamia wewe katika ile position umepatiwa kuweza kuadimika kwa mambo ya ukulima, mambo ya the micro, small and medium enterprises, mambo ya nyumba, na nyumba tu si nyumba ya kulipizwa, ni ile nyumba ya mortgage ambaye Mkenya ataweza kupata shelter, pengine mambo ya healthcare na hii mambo mengine, creative economy. Wewe katika ile nyadhifa umepatiwa, ni njia gani utaweka mikakati kuonyesha mambo haya yatatimika na Mkenya asiwe tena atakuwa ni mambo ya kungoja kama ile the big 4 agenda ambayo iliwekwa na serikali iliyopita na ikuweza kutimiza? Asante.
Yes, Honorable Mudavadi, the clock is ticking. You can quickly answer those questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with the issue about ambition. You know, there's Shakespeare, and in his book Macbeth, he made reference to how you should manage your ambition. He called it vaulting ambition. If you can have vaulting ambition and you're not careful, as you try to jump onto the horse, you will land on the other side of the horse. So I am a very pragmatic person. I am ambitious. That is why I'm sitting here. I am ambitious. But it is also important that we manage our ambition as we go forward. That is absolutely critical. And I would like to say that if I'm strong and I'm capable and I'm in good health, I think I should bring my experience in public life to bear for the people of Kenya to benefit from it. And that is why I'm sitting before this committee to present myself in that manner. I just want to say that any cabinet secretary that will be avoiding summons of parliament will be doing so at their own peril. Because parliament is so essential, it's so important, and it is absolutely necessary that we develop a respectable and collaborative approach when working with Parliament. I've been in Parliament myself. Some of you may be sitting exactly where I'm sitting in a few years' time, going through this process. And to me, we must cultivate a culture of respecting institutions that have been provided for in the Constitution. That is the hallmark of a good nation. So my view is that I will not hesitate to encourage members of cabinet at all times to make sure that they respect the summons of Parliament and work very closely with Parliament. In fact, perhaps I can also take this opportunity to say, to appeal to the broader Parliament through this committee that perhaps as we amended, as we go to our 2010 Constitution, there was one very critical thing that we may have done in haste in those days, but perhaps through the appeal made by the President, and I join myself on that appeal, that it may be useful that perhaps you can reflect on the standing orders to bring in even greater accountability from the executive on how they conduct the the activities, so that the issues of policy and whatever can be answered ana kwa ana by some of these people if need be. So that is something that may be looked at. I would also just want to say that it may be also very useful, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Chairman, but I was trying to look at why have we been seeing cases where legislation is collapsing a lot in court. And one of the things that has become a Waterloo for many pieces of legislation is the issue of public participation. It is a provision in the Constitution, but I would want to appeal to Parliament to give it more thought so that we can refine that area and figure out what is really public participation, what is adequate, what should be the parameters, because it's still vague. We are going by court rulings largely on this matter. I think some help from Parliament to refine this area might be very, very useful so that we can avoid too many delays of critical pieces of legislation as we go forward. I agree that we must continue looking at functions of government. There's wisdom always from a different perspective when creating the structures and functions of government. And all I can say now before this committee is that it's now going on record that there may be need going forward to review some of the functions and maybe where they are domiciled. I would not want to say that the Executive Order number 1 is cast in concrete. It is a living document that can be reviewed for further efficiency in government in some of the sector areas. I want to state that we must once again take Parliament very seriously. We must take the reports of the Auditor Generals very seriously. We must work in collaboration to help some of the critical independent institutions with the necessary resource. The Auditor General's office needs a lot of support. The budgetary allocation over the last few years has not been commensurate with the kind of tasks that they have. Just the way we saw that the judiciary needed more support, I think also institutions and offices like the Auditor General will need more support because their role of providing audits in a timely manner for all public entities, including county governments, is a very tall order. And they need to be resourced appropriately, financially, technologically, and even in terms of human resource. So these are critical areas. Kwa yale mambo ya agenda 4 zile kubwa, the big 4, kilimo, manufacturing, mambo ya afya na mambo ya kupeana makao ya kiheshima kwa Wakenya, mimi nitasema tu kwamba katika ile manifesto yetu ya Kenya Kwanza, hii agenda ambayo imetajwa hapa imenukuliwa kule ndani, iko kule ndani, na tutazidi kuangalia kwamba wakati pesa za kitaifa zinatengwa ama zitaelekezwa katika sekta hizi, ili tuwe na uwezo wa kuhakikisha kwamba tutatimiza yale ambayo tuliahidi wa Kenya. Nadhani nitakomea hapo kwa wakati huu.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Mudavadi. 3 minutes and final appeal to the committee in 3 minutes.
My prayers are that you find me suitable to work with you and to work with other Kenyans in delivering service to the people of Kenya. I just want to emphasize that in my role, I want to have a very strong interface with Parliament so that we can find common solutions. We are all there to help the people of Kenya, to serve them, and we cannot serve them by being isolated and living in silos. We must be able to cross the aisle and talk to each other. So this is what I would really want to encourage, and to say that I'll be ready and willing at all times to engage with you, either collectively, as in maybe in committees, or even individually as legislators, so that we can find solutions. The final thing I would urge is that we should also remind Kenyans that the challenge ahead of us is very, very serious. It's not a game of flattery to the Kenyan people. It's a question of being honest, being truthful, getting the right information to make decisions, so that we can restore, Mr. Chairman, let us restore trust in government. Let it not be a government of rumor mongering. This is what we want to try and avoid. We want to have an open government. We want to be able to have the facts on the table. Principles of accountability, transparency must be at the forefront of what we do. And also, when looking at the budgets, I would just help that plead with the Parliament that help us to eliminate something that I kept on calling in my campaigns as budgeted corruption. Budgeted corruption. This is something that we all need to fight and deal with. Up to this day, the person I'm going to meet at the railway station will still want to know why would a product cost 100 shillings in the kiosk, and when the government is procuring the same product, it costs 1,000. We must find a way of dealing with this issue. So I'm appealing to members of Parliament that as we go, let's work together, because the executive cannot find these solutions on its own. We have to work together. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mudavadi. The Secretariat will want to have a comparison between your original documents and the certified copies that you have provided. That can be done on the side. This brings an end to your engagement with this committee. I want to thank the honorable members for the wonderful, positive decorum and incisive questions that you have put to the nominee. And if we carry on like this, I think it will be a very, very good idea. You have all conducted yourselves very well. And Honorable Mudavadi, thank you for answering all the questions candidly. You are now released to go to your other national duties. And the Sergeant at Arms can now usher in our next nominee, who is the National Assembly Speaker Emeritus, the Honorable Justin Bedan Njoka Muturi.
Mr. Chairman, can I also leave this document here? I'm sure you have it, but I don't know. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry.
You can, yes, you can leave it, submit it as well, part of your document. bring the Honorable Muturi in 5 minutes so that members who are walking out to ease themselves or to have a cup of tea can... Leaders of the House, who is your whip in this regard? Because we want to observe. You yourselves will whip.
Nilikuwa nimekutafuta